name's Darren Cox. I work at QMUL. I'm a biology teaching technician. So we cater for the undergraduates, students in biosciences, and we just help with the teaching. Been keeping bees for 8 years, and it's a beyond fascinating, for me anyway, it's a beyond fascinating subject. They are just amazing little creatures. I mean, I got into it, I had an allotment at the time, and my neighbour opposite came over and asked if I could keep anything on the allotment. Unfortunately, the regulations were you couldn't keep anything, basically to stop vandalism and theft and things like that. So I said I couldn't, and I asked why, and he went, "Oh, I've started keeping bees, and I just was wondering if you could keep them on there." I went, "Bees?" He said, "Yeah, come over and have a look." So he took me to his back garden, and he had 3 hives in his back garden, which I didn't even know about. He'd been doing it about a year. His wife bought him lessons as a joke more than anything, but as soon as he started doing it, he loved it. And then we went to his back garden. I took my son with me, and they were probably about 2 or 3 feet away, just the other side of a fence, and it was amazing. It was like a revelation just to be there in amongst. There were thousands of bees flying in and out all around, but their intent was just doing what bees do, and we were just standing there like just an object, and they took no notice of us. But it was just the noise, and you could smell the hive, and I was hooked. So I went home and booked myself some lessons, and that was 8 years ago, and I haven't looked back since.
What type of bees do you manage?
I mean, the honeybees, but it's not a specific. With honeybees, there are sort of country-specific bees, especially around Europe. But because there's been so much interbreeding over the years, where professional beekeepers who do it as a business try to maximise the amount of honey they produce, have been sort of mixing different bees together to try and maximise bee production. I mean, we have a native bee here. It's a black bee, which is suited for the sort of English climate, but that has been sort of overtaken by just the bees that are there now, because even if you try and have a black bee colony, the queens that it produces will go off and mate with any drone. They go to a drone congregation point and they can mate with up to 20 different males. So the variation of the genes, that it's a real mix. So what you try and do, what you end up with is very hard. So yeah, just bees, honeybees.
How many hives do you manage, and what are some key responsibilities involved in taking care of bees?
At the moment, I've got 3 hives. I lost one over winter, which is just the way it goes sometimes. You can have a nice strong hive going into winter, then you check them in the new year when it starts to warm up, and they could have died. So this one died. There were stores there. There were a few dead bees. So it wasn't a case of that there was poison or disease, because normally you just end up with thousands of dead bees. And then I lost 2 over the summer. We went away on holiday, came back, and again the 2 that were in my back garden, because I like to have at least one in the garden so I can go and just have a look and watch and listen. Empty, both hives empty. No stores, no dead bees. So why? I have no idea. I've spoken to other beekeepers. If you had loads, thousands of dead bees, you could say disease or poisoning. But because there were no signs of that, then they're gone. And I've got the other ones as I say, at Mace's Meadow. With regards to looking after them, it's just making sure that they have enough stores. Weather plays a big part in the bees. Because coming out of winter, especially in this country, spring can be very late or very short or very dry. So they are very reliant on the spring flowers. and if they are late, or for whatever reason spring isn't how it should be, they're not going to get the stores built up to take them into sort of when they start to expand. So you have a quick look and you monitor their stores, and if you need to, then you can either give them some honeycomb that you've kept back and stored, you just put the whole comb in, or you can give them syrup, which is sugar and water with a bit of vinegar. They sort of break down into simpler sugars. The bees use a chemical called invertase, which starts to break down the sugars. So when they bring the nectar back, they pass the nectar, because it's basically just like water, and they pass it back and they mix it with invertase, and then as they with the passing it backwards and forwards, it starts to dehydrate, and they keep removing the water content down to about 18%, which is why it's so thin. And then they store it. So it's just watching that they have what they need. And also going into winter, when I sort of take honey, with the way the hive is constructed, you've got the brood box where the queen is, and all the larvae are laid, the eggs are laid, and that's where the hive lives. And then on top of that, you have a queen excluder which stops her going up into the supers. So the supers are where the excess honey is stored. So that's where I can take the honey from. And going into winter, I always make sure that they have an extra super full, and that is about 12 and a half kilos. And then the actual hive proper, in the brood box, they can store up to about 20-25 kilos, and that will feed them through the winter. So it's just a case of monitoring them as often as you need to. Some people go in every week, take the whole hive apart, have a look at everything, put it back together. Obviously that's very stressful. I just do the bare minimum just to know that they are okay.
What are some things bees require equipment-wise?
As I say, with the hive, they have the brood box and then the supers. For them, that is enough, but you just also have to make sure that with the supers, you can keep adding those, because if you were to get a really good honey nectar flow, they will just keep going and collecting it. So the idea is you just add these supers and make sure you empty them regularly. I always leave one there regardless, so it's not a shock. So you add them and you take them away, and you replace them, and when you replace them, they haven't got to go through all the effort of making all the honeycombs. It takes, I'm going to go old money, 10 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. So it's quite energy intensive and honey intensive to produce that. So when you take it away, the frames away, you spin them down in an extractor, and then you can put the frames back. Then they just fix it, and then they start refilling it. It's just keeping an eye on them, that they haven't got any diseases or any problems. You can do all of that really just by standing and observing them coming and going out the front of the hive. If there's lots of activity, lots of pollen going in on their back legs, you'll see a sort of a big, they look like tiny little stones, but they're pollen that they collect. They mix it with a bit of nectar to make it into a ball, and then they store it in the back of their legs. So if there's lots of that going in, that means that there's lots of brood that's being reared, because that's what they feed to the brood. They mix it up. A lot of it is observation and listening, because when you open the hive, you can, if they're nice and quiet, a little bit of buzzing going on, they're quite content. If you're taking a bit too long, say, to go through the hive, they obviously get a bit irritable, as anyone would do, and the noise and the pitch changes. So as soon as you hear that, you just close them back up and leave them be.
What are the most rewarding aspects of beekeeping for you?
Watching them go about their business. Many a time I've sat there just in a chair 2 or 3 feet away, just watching them and listening to them. You read about them, you read articles, and trying to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. And once you start going down that rabbit hole, you just keep going and going and going, because not only are they collecting nectar, they're collecting pollen, they're creating a thing called propolis, which is, it's like a glue So they stick things together, they fill holes, so it makes it airtight to a certain extent, watertight, and honey, wax and the propolis all have antibacterial, antimicrobial properties. Not only that they can monitor the temperature within the hive and change it at will. They monitor the water content, so they're bringing water in, and then if it gets too hot they can put water droplets, and then they can fan the air past the water droplets out the hive to cool it down. They're constantly monitoring the flow of bees going in and out, how much pollen they're bringing in, how much nectar they're bringing in, and they can judge if it starts to drop off, then they won't send bees out because it's a waste of energy and it's not very efficient. So that is the sort of really interesting and rewarding part, is trying to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then just helping them along the way by providing them with enough space if they need it.
What are some challenges you face when caring for bees?
The environment, obviously, the weather. I mean, they can pretty much ride out everything. Worrying about where the bees are at the moment at Macy's Meadow, that there are stories where people steal them. So other beekeepers will go around and steal other people's bees. Well, they are expensive if you wanted to buy bee hives and the bees. To buy a package of bees, it's about £250, but you can also attract them. I mean, people throw stones, people set them on fire. Sometimes animals will get in, and there have been cases where they have a scratch and then they knock it over. And that is unfortunate for the bees and for the animal that might have knocked them over, because one hive can easily kill a horse. When I was doing my training, there was a case where a little foal got into where the bees were, because lots of fresh grass, and it knocked a hive over. The hive started to sting the foal, and there were 3 adult horses in the field next door. They came to help the foal, and that one hive killed all of them, stung them all to death, which is unfortunate, obviously. You just hope that you've just given them enough space, and everything else is generally down to luck, that there's enough forage for them, that the weather's kind to them, and people don't touch them.
In your opinion, why are bees so important?
They're a pollinator, one of the many pollinators, like wasps. They're much misunderstood. Like bees, they also pollinate, but they also pick a lot of, because they're carnivores, they get a lot of grubs and things that would spread pests and diseases to plants, flowers and whatnot. But yeah, they're pollinators. Like with all things, as you know, studying biodiversity, there's so many outside influences that are causing so much damage quickly. The people that want to protect them haven't got the voice or the power to really sort of fight with all the pollution and the causes of pollution. It's very, very difficult. They're just important what they do, and for me, they bring a lot of enjoyment.
What are some changes that could be done to increase biodiversity?
Stop burning stuff, stop burning hydrocarbons. I mean, the fact that you can go into a shop and buy pesticides and things that you can spray on any plant any time, that doesn't help. When farmers spray crops, they're supposed to do it either very early in the morning or very late at night when there's no wind, so it would supposedly give time for the pesticides to do their jobs. But where I had the first couple of years I had my first bees, they were next door to East Malling Agricultural Research Station, and they would spray any time when it was windy, cut down on meat production, because again that uses a lot of hydrocarbons, oil, diesel, gas. It's a very simple thing to do. Use less pesticides, planting more flowers. Anywhere that there's grass, areas around with loads of wildflowers. Cut down on monocrops being grown in this country. Where I live, it's just fields of wheat as far as the eye can see.
Have you seen anything major affect your bees?
The ones at East Malling, I did lose a colony there, but I came back to it. The inside of the hive was about 2 centimetres thick of dead bees, and they are sort of 40 centimetres square, and then lots of dead bees on the floor. So they obviously had been poisoned. Other than things that you can help them with, the poisoning and pesticides and things like that people are spraying. There's not a lot you can do, just hope for the best.
How do you manage the bees during seasonal changes?
If we get sort of heading towards winter, which we are now, then you just see how much stores they've got. So as I say, they need at least 25 kilos of honey to see them through the winter. Once you come out of winter, you've got spring, but with the way the weather has been changing over the years, it's not as cold as it used to be. So if the hive is warmer, then they will be using more stores. So you want it a nice cold, frosty winter, where they will form a cluster of bees, about 10,000 or so, which is enough to see them through the winter. And they don't hibernate. They just reduce their activity, and they vibrate their flight muscle, which generates heat, because they are cold-blooded, but when they're in a cluster or in the hive, they need to generate heat in order for the grubs to grow, the eggs to grow and develop. So you're watching that going into winter, and then, as I say, leave at least one super's worth. And then from about late September, October, you don't need to visit them at all. March comes around, and then you start to go and have a look. You feel the hive, so you move it on one side, and you can judge the weight. And if it's still quite heavy, then you know there's enough stores in there for them for the next few weeks. Again, just observation for the first couple of months leading in during spring, and then May, when it because you still have frost in May. You just watching and feeling the weight. And then once all the spring flowers come, then you can put some supers on and watch them. And then what they want to do in order to reproduce, they'll swarm. You can either wait for them to swarm, which isn't always the best, because you could put a hive there and hope that they will swarm into the hive. That's very risky. So what you would normally do, you could split the hive, so wait till the whole brood box, every single frame covered in bees, and then you can basically make sure that half that you're taking away has got freshly laid eggs, because what they'll do, the queen is either here or she's in this one, and if she's not in this one, they will recognise that, and then they will produce a queen cell, and then they would take one of these day-old grubs and put that into the queen cell, and then this would produce a new queen, and you've just reduced the volume of bees by half, and that should stop them wanting to swarm. And again, you just monitor both like you would do, feed them, because you've taken half the stores away. And then ongoing through summer, they're building, they will start to build new comb. If you haven't given them existing comb already, you put supers on and just keep going and just monitoring them. And then if you want, you can set up bait hives where they want to swarm. I've had some hives in my back garden with some old comb in, and you will get bees from colonies that are about to swarm or have just swarmed, and they will come along and inspect the hive. So they'll come in, they'll fly around, they'll go in, then they'll come out, and then they'll go in again, and eventually they'll go in and they'll measure the volume of the hive. They need about 60 cubic litres of volume in order to build up enough comb to store enough honey to take them through the winter. So you can get bees that way. But it's just going with the flow of how the bees are.
How do you protect the bees from common pests and diseases? I
don't treat my bees with any chemicals at all. Lots of people do. A lot of the commercial people do, because they want to maximise the honey production. I don't do it for the honey, I do it for the fun of keeping them. I believe that if I don't go into them often, I go in when I need to, because the more times you go into them, the more you create stress. If it's stressed, like we know with humans, if you're stressed, you're not going to perform well, you're going to get cold, you're going to get sick. So I just observe and then take action if need be. So if they are strong, like a human being, if you exercise and you eat healthily and have a good diet, you'll be able to fight most common ailments. Same with the bees. So I'm quite lucky in that way, other than the one where I lost at near Macy's Meadow, which I believe was down to the fact that they've been poisoned by pesticides. And you do get losses over the winter, and you just do get losses throughout the year. Generally, I give them what they need. There's not a lot you can do other than just to make sure that they've got enough of everything they need. And don't take all the honey at the end of the season. If you take all the honey, you've got all the enzymes, the vitamins and minerals that are in the honey. Commercial producers will take all the honey and then they will just give them, as I say, syrup, which is sugar water. And sugar is just pure carbohydrates. There's no real vitamins and minerals and goodness in it. So they're just taking that away and just giving them pure energy back.